Okay, so for this question, we have a 55-year-old woman slipped and fell on some ice and is complaining of right lateral wrist pain. She stated that she put her arm out behind her to break her fall. Upon examination, you note no pain or swelling over the radius or ulna, but there is pain and swelling in the anatomical stuff box. So what is the most likely diagnosis? So first off, you have to know what the anatomical snuff box is, and it's actually, if you look at your posterior thumb and extend it, there is a kind of divot or indentation between two tendons, those two tendons being the extensor pollicis brevis and the extensor pollicis longus. They're just two tendons that are used to extend the thumb, and that actually that area is right over top of the scaphoid bone. If you remember from your carpals, the scaphoid being one of your carpal bones, and which is also one of the most common bones that is fractured in the body. So for the response, C is the correct response because there was no pain on the radius or ulna, so more than likely they wouldn't be fractured. If someone fractures a bone, there would be pain upon palpation. And humerus, I mean, that's the upper arm, so it doesn't fit a wrist-like pain in this situation. So the scaphoid is the fracture in question. It's a carpal fracture, and when someone slips and falls on ice, a main response is to put your hands out behind you to break your fall, and we call this a foosh fracture, or F-O-O-S-H, or falling on an outstretched hand fracture, because this happens so often, especially in Canada with our icy winters, and people slip and fall all the time, and most of the time they put their hand out and use their hands to break their fall. A scaphoid fracture is common with this type of fall. You could easily fracture the radius and ulna with it, but in this presentation that wasn't the case. There is a second part to this question, and that is, what is the potential risk of a scaphoid fracture? And if you remember from class, the scaphoid is shaped kind of like a half moon, and blood supply only enters the bone on one end. So if the fracture doesn't heal properly, there's a discontinuation between one side of the bone and the other, so blood can't cross the fracture line. So the distal end of the bone becomes avascular, and like any tissue without blood supply, which would lead to necrosis. So A would be the correct response. Avascular necrosis is common with scaphoid fractures. And the other ones just don't really make sense. It wasn't an open fracture. It wasn't a large fracture like a femur leading to a fat emboli. But there is a potential risk of avascular necrosis. And surgery would be needed, and what they do is they either re-break it or they pack scrapings of bone, usually from the pelvis, in the area to kind of form that junction from one side of the bone to the other to have that continued blood supply. So that is a common presentation for a scaphoid fracture, and it's usually that presentation where someone slips and falls and uses their hand for support.